we're just hitting the top of the hour. So I'd like to welcome you all to our masterclass in resource planning. I always love doing webinars on resource planning. The level of detail that we can get into, I think, is very good. It's a very good subject overall. So I'd like to introduce to you our speakers. I'd like to introduce to you, first of all, John Fraze from Core Practice. And John, you're going to be taking us through exploding some of the common misconceptions about resource planning.
That is going to be the effort, yes.
Wonderful. So, and John, if people aren't familiar with you and your background, would you like to sort of give a quick pen portfolio of your career and the business you work for?
Sure. So I'm a managing partner of a company called Core Practice. We're a labor strategy firm, and our goal is to do really two things. One is capture cost savings for our clients, but the other is to improve morale and employee engagement and retention as well. And so we take two opposing strategies and we put them together, and it's a balancing act. Our firm, over the last 15 years, has saved companies, mostly Fortune 500, but lots of smaller companies as well, over $250 million. And you can translate that into pounds. It gets a little smaller, the number does. But we are all about capturing cost savings, but certainly engage the employees heavily through that process. I sit on the board of HR.com. And I work with a wide variety of industries, but I used to run strategic services at Blue Pumpkin Software, which is now Verint.
Wonderful. So a big depth of knowledge there, which I think is fabulous. We're joined today by Megan Jones on the news desk, and Megan's going to be looking at top tips and questions from the audience. And we're also joined by Chris Steele and Dean Couchman from Injixo. And Chris, you're going to be talking us through some scheduling, or the way that you can use workforce management scheduling technology.
That's right. I mean, John's got some interesting points to make this afternoon. I'm not going to steal his thunder, but a lot of that speaks well to good practice in using scheduling applications. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and give you a bit of a glimpse of some of the software.
And you might steal some of my thunder, Chris, because the reality is I can talk about strategy all day long, and if people can't do it, it doesn't really matter. And so I think you're going to talk about, hey, here's how you can actually execute on the strategies John's talking about. So you might steal some of it.
And Dean, you're going to drill down and take us through a little demonstration of how that can be achieved. So I think we might have just lost Dean there for a minute. We'll see if we can bring Dean back.
He's probably on mute. He's probably on mute, but the answer is yes, he will.
Yes, I'll be sort of covering off sort of the areas that John goes through as well and showing it, with a piece of application that might be able to help as well.
Fabulous. So just a bit of housekeeping. It's callcenterhelper.com/chat, the chat room. You can leave your tips and questions in the chat room. There is a bottle of champagne or a box of chocolates for the best tip, and we do ship to all parts of the world. We shipped a prize off to Trinidad actually on Monday from our Monday webinar. So John, if I could ask you to pick the winning tip, please.
Sure.
Okay. There'll be a recording of the webinar available later on today, and white paper will come out to you from Injixo. So the chat room, very simple, no commercial messages. Just put your first name, last name, and email in. And it's very straightforward. Once you're logged in, you can see this link here where you're able to download the webinar slides. And if you want a transcript of the chat log, you put the chat log in there. It does come up on two separate screens. What a lot of people do, just move the chat log to the one side of the screen, the webinar to the other side, and you can get a sort of two-screen effect. So you can see both things that are going on. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to start off with a poll. We're going to be looking at scheduling, so I'd just like to ask which shift patterns does your contact center operate? Select all that apply: full-time, part-time, rotating shifts, flexible shifts, and banked hours or annualized hours. So it should be fairly straightforward. Banked hours or annual hours, if you're not familiar with the concept, is where people can effectively work more hours during busy periods and then take that time off during quieter periods. So it's sort of like a bit like a sort of flexi time that's spread across the business year. So let's have a look at that. John, which shift patterns do you think are going to be the most and least likely in the survey?
I'm thinking 8-hour shifts is the story, 7.5, 7, somewhere around there, 7 to 8. And the least likely is going to be the 12-hour shift.
Okay, well, let's have a look at the...
let's let everybody prove me wrong now.
Results we've got coming back. So we've got the majority is indeed the full-time shift, 86%, 70% work part-time shifts, 59% rotating shifts, only 51% flexible shifts, which can be very effective, and 18% banked or annualized hours. So a bit of a spread overall there. What I'd like to do just drill down and just like to ask the question, which you can answer in the chat room, in 1 or 2 words. What is the biggest challenge that you face with resource planning? So if you'd just like to type that into the chat room.
And I was in the chat room instead of in the poll, so I've already blown it once, Jonty. Thank you.
Okay, no worries. So
we don't really start thinking properly until after noon here in New York.
Emma says the biggest challenge she faces is staff turnover. Simon says it's available part-time staff in the BBO. Sean says it's shrinkage. Serge says integration of front and back office teams. Demand spike, says Ian. Excel limitation, says Adam. Another Adam says it's rapidly growing. Mohill says it's staff turnover. We've got Roger saying it's too much manual work. Anna says it's 24-hour coverage and sick leave. Matthew says it's predicting the volume of calls. Mike says it's back office planning. Dean says staff turnover. Ira says communication with ops. Dean, an interesting one here, says it's average handling time versus after-call work.
Yeah, that's a big one.
And Mike says small operating hours, 8 till 8, Monday to Friday, which limits shift options. So there are loads more ones coming into the chat room, but it seems to be a sort of whole range of different ones. Shift pattern seems to be a common theme. Difficulty of generating schedules and IT problems seems to be another one. And also sort of taking control of average handling time and overall on call times. So quite a range there, John.
Yeah, I think a large chunk of this is I have a hard time matching the workforce to an ever-changing workload. And so whether it's looking at shrink and managing the effective time of your agents, or it's looking at a demand curve that is incredibly challenging, there's a lot of that in here. The average handle time and the wrap up is also interesting. The after call work, which is another piece of that, or looking at idle time, if you will. How do we get as much effectiveness out of our workforce? And so I think that's kind of the recurring theme here, which is good. You've all come to the right session.
Wonderful. Well, I think that's probably an appropriate time to hand the baton across to John Fraze from Core Practice. So, John, if I pass the baton across to you, and perhaps you can take us through your Beyond the Basics, exploding some of the common misconceptions as part of this masterclass in resource planning.
And you told me I have 2 hours for this, right?
Yes.
Exactly.
Condensed down to 20 minutes.
All right, I'll move quickly. You guys are terrorizing me already. So this is a masterclass in resource planning that we're going to do in a very short period of time. And so again, John T. said you can download these slides and spend more time on them on your own, and certainly reach out to all of us with questions as we go through them. You already heard who I am. This is a great picture of me, and this is a great write-up my mother put together, so most of it's true. But I don't want to focus anymore on this. Starting with sharing best practices. We work with a wide variety of industries. You can see some of them here. What's interesting is the call center, the contact center, is the youngest of all the industries you can see on the page here, but it's also the most advanced when it comes to labor strategy. And probably because when contact centers became more and more widespread, technology was really coming of age, and we were able to manage them more effectively. So there are things that we can learn from people like BMW or Kraft Foods or others in manufacturing that we can apply to the contact center space, but really the contact center is at the forefront of labor strategy, and really the rest of the industries are looking to the contact center to learn. I want to start with some very, very basic stuff, okay? And so I'm going to start with two different shift schedules, and we're going to do a poll, and I'm going to ask you which one would you personally rather work if you were a contact center agent, okay? Let's say, and this is a little unrealistic, but let's say that the contact center is only open Monday through Friday. So your first option is you could work Monday through Friday, 8-hour shifts. This gives you 260 work days a year. You're going to have 104 days off. You're going to get all your weekends off. Your longest break is 2 days, and you never work more than 5 shifts in a row before getting that 2-day break. So you've all seen this before. This is nothing revolutionary. Monday through Friday, 8-hour shifts. That's option A for you. Option B is a 12-hour shift. And yes, a 12-hour shift can be a really long day, but in this schedule, you're going to work Monday to Wednesday, and then you're going to get Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday off, a 6-day weekend, before working 3 12-hour shifts. You're going to get your weekend off again before going down to the 3rd week in your rotation, working 2 days, having a day off. They call that the honey-do day, where you can get all your honey-do list done, right? You know, mow the lawn, you know, doctor's appointment, bank, whatever you need to do. Work 2 days, and you're going to get your weekend off again. So you're going to get all your weekends off like you did with the 8-hour shifts. The difference is we're going to give you 87 more days off a year. Instead of 260 work days, you're going to get 173 work days with 191 days off. All your weekends are going to be off. Your longest break is 6 days, and you're going to get 17 of them, and you're never going to work more than 3 shifts in a row. So for this poll, I want to know, what do you prefer? Do you want to work the A option, the 8-hour shifts, or B, the 12-hour shifts?
So that's quite an interesting question. I think we've got most people voted now on that one. I'm going to share the results up on the screen, and here's the results, John.
Let me see.
So we have 55% on 12-hour shifts, 45% on the classic 8-hour shift.
So this is this is really key. Okay, it's not that everybody wants one of these. There's a really healthy split here, but you have to ask yourself, how many of your employees do you allow to work 12-hour shifts? So one example of this is at Bell Canada. Bell Canada is one of our clients. They've got about 12,000 agents that handle everything from high-speed internet to TV and pay-per-view and all that stuff. And so let me show my screen again. Let me go back in. So the interesting piece for them was that they had about 34% of the employees that wanted the 12-hour shift. We only allowed 18% to work the 12-hour shift that happened to work well for their demand curve. But the bigger story was, if you can't work the 12s and be as productive as you need to be, we have plenty of people that want to work it, but we're not going to force people onto the schedule. So this is just from a resource planning perspective. If a 12-hour shift is something that works for your business, why not let a small cross-section of your workforce do it, as long as they can be productive and successful at in those time intervals? Again, you may be able to attract more high-skilled or highly engaged employees, and especially how the world's changing right now with the younger workforce, it'd be really great to attract the best of that crop as you move forward. So I'm going to step back from that now, and I've got a couple of tips for the group as we go through resource planning. Number one is we want you to understand the cost of overtime versus idle time. Idle time is another word really for shrinkage. It doesn't mean people are sitting around for hours on end, but it may be a loss in productivity. So I'm going to take you through a very basic calculation. You're going to want to apply your own numbers as you understand this. So there's 3 key considerations when you look at the fully loaded cost of one agent for 1 hour in your contact center. You've got the base wage. In my example, I'm using 10 pounds. I know that this varies wildly across different types of contact centers, so plug in your own number. For the burden, that's all those fringe or the paid benefits that you'd pay an employee. Most of those are fixed cost, but those are benefits that you pay an employee for every hour they work. And then you've got the pay ratio. The pay ratio is a third component you have to consider, which is all the paid time off that you give to an employee over the course of a year. So things like vacation and holiday. Really, the fraction that you look at is the total number of hours you pay an employee over the hours they actually work. Okay? So we put these things together. For straight time, we're looking at 10 pounds times 1.35 times 1.15, and we get 15 pounds, 53 pence. Okay, so the fully loaded cost with all the benefits that we're paying them is not 10 pounds, but it's 15.53. If I look at overtime, I get my 10 pounds. I'm paying a penalty for the overtime at time and a half, and then I have some additional benefits that I pay. Now, I don't pay all the same additional taxes and fees on overtime. I pay some of those things at a rate of about 10%, but they don't get any additional vacations or holidays, as an example, because they're working, 45 hours a week, as an example. So when I look at the overtime cost, it's 16 pounds 50. Well, this is not 1.5 times 15.53, and I think that's a key takeaway for everybody here is overtime is really not that much more expensive than straight time. On an adverse cost basis, the adverse cost of straight time is always going to be zero, meaning I have just the right amount of agents for the amount of workload they need to accomplish. It doesn't cost the company anything additional. The adverse cost of idle time or having shrink occur, which a lot of you mentioned in the chat room, is 15 pounds 53 pence. So all that shrink is incredibly expensive, especially when you start multiplying it across a wide range of agents. Now, let's say we've had a really effective 40 hours, 37 hours, whatever your base is, depending on where you're located in the world. And we say, how about working an additional hour to cover a spike in demand? The adverse cost there is really the difference between these two numbers, or 97 pence. So it's less than 1 pound per hour for overtime on an adverse cost basis. You're getting the value of their time, they're doing the work, and you're only having to pay slightly less than £1 an hour to get them to stay. So now in their paycheck, they see the time and a half, right? They see, wow, I got 10 pounds times 1.5, but the company is only paying slightly more than what they would traditionally pay based on all those benefits. So why does this matter? It matters because it's approximately 16 times more expensive to have shrink than to use overtime. So what does this tell us? Should we staff slightly lower and flex up with overtime to hit those peaks? Or should we be like those retailers that staff way larger than they should, according to the Wall Street Journal article, and just send people home or regularly tell them they're not needed? And so you can kind of kill two birds with one stone. One is there's inefficiencies associated with overstaffing. Secondly, we're really looking at killing morale with very little financial gain. And so the better story is staff in a more lean way and figure out who wants the overtime and make sure you can give it to them. So the overtime perceptions, we've surveyed hundreds of thousands of employees around the world. And here's what they tell us. If you look at the blue bars here, the normative database, almost 38% say they're working less overtime than they'd like. The key for all of you is don't take this slide and say, well, this must be what we're doing. Every single contact center that we work with has a massively varying change in what the preference is for their agents. You need to know specifically what your agents think. So don't worry about the norms. Don't read all the white papers and articles about overtime. Engage your workforce and ask them what they want. And I think you'll learn something from that and maybe be able to use it as a tool to flex. So number two is choose your service level wisely. One poll we could have asked today, if we had unlimited time, would be, what's your service level? And I think what we see is a lot of 80-20 and 90-30 out there. 80% of your calls answered in 20 seconds or less, as an example. The problem is that is an antiquated service level that was invented in the 1970s at Bell Labs that has nothing to do probably with your customer service requirements. If we look at a hazard curve or the way that customers abandon, this is a pretty typical look at what you'll see. The really hurried up group hangs up by the 21st second of their call. They hit 0 a couple of times, they didn't get a live agent, and they're gone. After that, we see a large amount of patience. So the takeaway on this slide is, don't worry about the first 15 to 20 seconds, and don't feel like you need to be penalized for people just hanging up because they didn't get a live agent right away. Understand the patience level. We see the customer behavior, how they act when they call in, and the expectation they have as they sit on hold. Now, we're not telling you that you need to wait until they're really angry and about to hang up. Let's say somewhere after 205 seconds in this example. It might be different for you. But we should be looking at a reasonable service level based on their behavior and expectation, not something that you inherited from the 1970s, 40 years ago, that doesn't matter anymore. Okay, so this is important for one major reason, and that is your service level determines everything else you do. It is sort of at the top of the checklist as you go through your resource planning strategy. If you have the wrong service level, the rest of it doesn't really matter. You may be kicking yourself saying, I can't believe we're not meeting our service level. If your service level is wrong, who cares? It doesn't matter unless you have the right service level. So let's get this right. And we're not telling you, and this is more of a standard chart, but we're not telling you should be trying to answer every call. Okay, as you try to answer 100% of the calls, which is statistically impossible anyway, you can see that there is a massive increase in cost based on staffing level required. So there are levels of diminishing returns as you go through it. That curve is going to be different for all of you, but you really need to make sure you've got a very solid hold on service level before you get into everything else. So tip 3 is matching the workforce to the workload. If we do our true labor cost calculation and we understand the adverse cost of overtime, if we do the service level analysis and we understand what that right service level is, and by the way, I know service level analysis is worth millions of dollars to many organizations, but it's also incredibly difficult to do. I understand that. We're just giving you sort of a high-level look at it today. And then 3, you sort of earn the right to match the workforce to the workload and go through some exercises. So I always kid around. I say achievement, you can do anything you set your mind to when you have vision, determination, and an endless supply of expendable labor. And really this is the Wall Street Journal story. As long as we don't have to treat them like human beings, it's a piece of cake. You look at the pyramids were built, not completely, but in large part by slaves, right? They weren't concerned about double time on Sunday or, UK labor law infringements, right? These were not their concerns. If people died, they got more. So it's a little bit more complicated to staff a contact center than it is to build a pyramid. And I think all of you have felt that pain. So I want to take you through some iterations. If you look at this, it's an actual customer forecast, service level goal of 80-20, which we know automatically is probably wrong, but we're using some generics here to get through this. We prefer overstaffing and maximizing overall service level. There's no preference nor assignment rules, and the goal is to create a schedule that meets the weekly service level goal. Now, we're going to tell you want to meet a intraday or daily service level goal, but again, we're going to keep it at a high level for this, and then you can drill down as you get better and better at it. The first iteration, they're all going to build on each other, is 8-hour shifts, 5 days a week, consistent start times on hour intervals only, consistent off-phone periods with fixed start times, and your break happens 2 hours into your shift. You get a lunch 4 hours into it, and then another break 6 hours in, and you have 2 days off in a row where one day has to be a weekend. So you can see Monday through Sunday, we've got different service levels in here, but in the end, it shows up as an 80 for the week, and that's the goal. The required number, that 249, is just the technology saying this is the lowest amount you could possibly have if you opened up all of the possibilities, but we're at 310. So I'll take you through a couple of these. Iteration 2 is we're opening up our break and lunch periods, so we're letting the technology have more flexibility in what it can do. And we save 6 FTE here, or 227,000 pounds, just by opening up our breaks and lunches.
And with these FTE costs, this is for a sort of more expensive this is a technical support contact center, I'm guessing.
That's right. That's right. So when you look at the fully loaded 37,000 pounds, we're looking at more of a technical agent here than the typical, really 25,000 to 30,000 pound, fully loaded with benefits person that you would typically see. You're typically at around 30,000 pounds with benefits. We're already up to 38,000 pounds, a little bit more expensive, and that again is based on skill.
But you'd need to do your own calculations on these.
Absolutely. Start with the true labor cost, do some multiplication. By the way, if you multiply, don't multiply by something like 2,000 hours. You've got to back out all those vacations and holidays you've already accounted for when you look at the total number of hours they're working in a year. You don't want to double count. So we capture some cost savings just by opening up breaks and lunches, which many of you know. That's not this isn't, revolution. But we start building on it and we say, okay, for iteration 3, we're going to let the shift start on 30-minute intervals instead of hours. Okay, what do we get for that? 2 FTE, we're up to 303,000 pounds. We can increase start windows for off-phone periods, so we're making those breaks and lunches even larger. Now, you may get some complaints from some of your agents saying, I always have my break with Tim, and now I've got these, there's many more options for breaks, and we've been separated. You have to evaluate both the employee engagement piece and the benefit to the business. Here, we're capturing a couple of FTE worth of cost savings, about $72,000, $73,000, $74,000. Is it worth it to do that? And that's a question you're going to have to answer yourself. If we look at iteration 5, we're adding 10-hour shifts. So what do 10-hour shifts do for us? Well, as we look at the Monday through Sunday, we can see a jump in my service level on Saturday. I still have my 80 overall, little improvement on Sunday. Still, those are not great days for service. And I'm capturing a bunch of cost savings, though. So in this example, I'm looking at a 7 FTE reduction and still hitting my service level goal. So 10-hour shifts can be very helpful. Here I'm saying, hey, those 10-hour shift employees no longer require a weekend day off, and that's going to help my weekend service level go up. And I'm going to jump through these a little faster just to say that there's different ways to do it, taking off the Saturday and Sunday requirement, removing the weekend day off requirement so employees don't have to have a weekend day off anymore. Now look at those service levels all across the board, especially on Saturday and Sunday. They're looking pretty good, hitting the targets. Consistency requirements for off-phone periods. So let's say every day I have a different break and lunchtime. Not only is this going to create confusion for my employees, right, but it's going to hurt morale as well, right? Because now, I usually have my break at 10 o'clock in the morning, so maybe I'm not going to remember when my break is on Tuesdays, and I'll take it at the wrong time. And so this consistency, yes, you're saving 4 FTE, but how much are you losing on productivity based on the confusion you're creating? I think that's an important question to ask. Yes, we're over 2 million pounds here, so that's exciting, but what are we losing on the productivity side based on confusion? I think this is one that certainly could create some confusion. Now this one, iteration 9 or iteration 10, is a killer, in my opinion. You're only saving 1 FTE here, and you can see on the right, yes, we have a bump on service level. So in the one before, we're up to 82. Here we're still over 80 at 81, but we're only saving 1 FTE. We're saving 1 FTE, and we're driving our employees crazy, right? Today I started at 7 in the morning. Tomorrow is 9:30. The next day is 10, and the next day is 6 in the morning. Those are the kinds of things that cause massive amounts of turnover and confusion. And what did I really save? Well, I got 1 point on my service level, so that could be exciting. But I'm only capturing 1 FTE in cost saving of 37,000 pounds. Is it worth it? I think in this example you'd have to say no, but again, I'll leave that up to you. So going back to this, just to say, go through these iterations. You don't have to do any of these things, but what we always tell our customers is you want to close the door, pull the blinds down, and really take your technology and stress it out. Do a lot of different scenarios and be able to say, if we make this change, this is what it's worth. If any of you on the call today really want to drive getting a promotion and moving ahead in the business, the best thing you can do is understand all of these scenarios and take these to your boss before they come to you. You want to go to your boss and say, hey, we can save 1.8 million pounds by making these changes. This is my recommendation. You don't have to go with all of them. But you don't want your boss to come to you and say, hey, we've got to take 1.8 million pounds out of the organization. Go figure it out. You want to already have this done and be proactive, and I promise you it will help drive improvements in your own career because they'll say this is somebody who's really a strategic asset to the company. This is really what drives that. So tip number 4, drive future agent behavior by analyzing current practices. So I just wanted to grab a couple of these and say, these are super easy things to do from an analytical perspective. Grab your sick information, do the analysis, and say, what do we have here? Where are most of our agents sick? Fridays tend to be a big day. You know, in this example, 40% more than any other day, but it may be different for you. This will take you 10 minutes to grab the information, throw it in a chart, and I'd look at breakouts of this in a lot of different ways, but I think it's helpful. How about by month? When do they get sick the most by month? September is not flu season. I don't care where you live in the world. So what's going on? In this example, they had used all their vacation during the summer, and they had back to school with their children in September, and so they'd already used all their vacation, and they used sick days to get some days off to take care of their kids. Vacation distribution. Migrating vacation to the low season. If your contact center is seasonal, as most are, what happens in your low season? You may say, hey, we do all our training then, so there's not a lot of shrink during that period, but there probably is. So what if we could tell our agents, if you take 4 vacation days in the lowest possible time of the year, we'll give you the 5th day for free. You say, geez, that's really expensive, giving away an additional vacation day. What's really expensive is experiencing all the shrink during all of those weeks of your low season and not being able to do anything about it. Sometimes it's better to get all the vacation off the books than to just experience the shrink and kind of the slow death that occurs as your people aren't as effective during those low periods of time. Scheduled time off, I think this is an important story for all of you, which is, what do our employees tell us about how they like their schedules? Does it give me enough time off, quality time off, fit into my family and social life, flexible, predictable? Does it give me effective training? The blue is my normative database. Again, several 100,000 agents around the world. This is what they're telling us. Really about half of them do not get enough time off. It's not quality time off. It doesn't fit into their family and social life. It's not flexible, and it's not predictable, right? This is the percent that say yes, so the converse of that is the group that says no. This is sort of an epidemic in all shift work operations. I don't care if you're in a contact center or somewhere else. So think about these and how you can improve them. We say it's through shift schedules, and 55% of you agree that the 8-hour shift would not be your first choice. So what are we going to do about it? We've got to be innovative, and we've got to lead the charge. So finally, looking at uncovering hidden costs, this is a good checklist to take into your management team, sit around and say, what are the biggest issues for us? Do we have a cost analysis of our service level? Are we losing revenue opportunities? You can look through all of them. Absenteeism and attrition, what's that costing us? Do we have the right KPIs? How about a skill imbalance? Are our afternoon or evening shift people more effective than our day shift people, or vice versa? So look at all of this stuff, and I think you'll at least get started on what the right answers might be for you and start uncovering some of those hidden costs. So I appreciate being included, and thank you very much, John T. and the team, and especially in Jigsaw as a sponsor, to include me in this session. I look forward to taking questions as we go through it.
Thank you very much indeed for that, John. I think there's some key points you've brought out there. I think the helping people's career by understanding some of the shift planning scenarios, senior management certainly like it if you can go to them with proposals on how to improve things. I think the idea of migrating holidays to the low season, I think, is very appropriate. And also, I think thinking about, do we allow people enough time off at the time they want it, and particularly, are the schedules predictable? Because that's something within our powers to plan a predictable schedule if we can do that.
Yeah, John T., the number one issue for agents is predictability. Of all the things we talked about, yes, some they score higher on than others, but the number one issue is predictability for them. And that goes back to the Wall Street Journal article, so thanks for picking out such a great topic, because predictability is the story. Don't mess with my life.
Wonderful. So I wonder if in the chat room, if people can say, have they been able to achieve predictable schedules, and how they've done that would be interesting to see. Right, we're going to jump across to the chat room now, and we've going to have a look at the top tips and questions. Just a reminder, hashtag tip for a tip and hashtag question for a question. So we're going to jump across to Megan. And Megan, what have you got for us in the chat room?
Hi, John T. The chat room's been really busy today. We're going to start with a question by Candice that actually follows up from the earlier poll. So, John, sorry, John, if you want to answer this one. Do unexpected absences have a bigger impact when staff are working the 12-hour shift pattern?
Well, they have a bigger financial negative impact on the agent, and so they're more likely to show up. So absenteeism occurs when an agent breaks the schedule, and we really want you to think about it that way, breaking the schedule. So when we give them a 12-hour shift pattern, they have more days off to get things accomplished that they need to do in their own lives. It turns out they have other things going on in their lives aside from their job at the contact center. And so 12-hour shifts actually drive absenteeism down for two reasons. One is if I miss a 12-hour shift, I'm missing 12 hours of pay. And the other is they don't traditionally need to break the shift schedule by not showing up to handle other activities in their lives because they have so many other days off to get those things accomplished.
Okay,
so that's a great question.
Yeah, I thought that was a very good question, so I put it at the top of the list. Thanks for that detailed answer. We've got a tip in now from Philippe that says, we have floor walkers that will approach advisors to tackle after call work. Seems to be a bit of a hot topic in the chat room today, so we've got another comment. Our floor walkers also help with any questions, so minimise the time that advisors will spend on looking for somebody to help and consequently on hold time. We've had another tip in from Michael, and I really like this one. It says, we leverage on dream shifts to drive agent performance. We allow top 5 or 10 performing agents to have their preferred shifts as an incentive. We use these shifts as base schedules and build the rest of the team schedules around them. Chris, is this quite a common practice? Do you think it can go a long way in improving workforce management?
I wouldn't say in our experience it's been common practice. We do see that. And of course, it puts a bit of a burden on whoever's doing the scheduling of the employees, because you have to start with those dream shifts as the first Lego bricks you put in place. And
hello, sorry, Chris, are you still there?
Yes, hello.
Yep, you're here.
Did I get cut off? I got cut off in my plan. How far did I get?
Just missed the last sentence.
So one thing I'll add for Chris on this one is that the only issue that we see on the 5 or 10 performing agents, that piece, is if you're an outbound sales contact center, those people may pick the schedules where they get the highest amount of success, and that will lock them into those positions, not because they're great agents, because they have the best opportunities to close deals. And so when you look at things like quartiling, you often end up with people locked in the bottom quartile and the top quartile because they have the greatest opportunity to be successful. And that's certainly a challenge.
Okay, thank you for that. And then we've got a final question as well from Andy that says, what is the best way to reduce manager intervention during a change of work pattern request process? Obviously, there are occasions when a pattern needs to be agreed due to personal circumstances, but how do you strike the balance between servicing the customer and keeping the agent happy? Dean, did you want to answer this one?
I knew you picked me for that one. I'd say there's always the occasion when, obviously, there is always going to be manual intervention in any scheduling process. I think it's having a procedure or an agreement in place with the employees on how often and how much notice do people have to give. And that will minimise the individual one-off touches. And I think that's the key time saver for this piece. And the more notice you get, the better you can plan it as well. So those last-minute ones that always will happen will be, there'll be fewer of them. But the big batches done initially, it's almost leading back to that other question on the dream shifts. You have to put that effort in the first instance manually. Do it as a bulk change, so you can then just run the schedules as normally. If you incorporate into that process, it'll improve the customer service, and also the agents will be far happier, hopefully, because they know they've got the opportunity to, to put their request forward, rather than being told, sorry, you're too late. Whereas in advance, they know the boundary point to begin with.
Okay, thank you for that, Dean. I think that's all we've got time for, John T. Back to you.
Yeah, we'll be coming back to tips in a short while. But we're just going to follow up on John Fraser's point about service level. And I'd like to ask the question, in your service level, what is the time element of that? Say, is it 80% of calls answered in 20 seconds? In that case, answer 20 to 29 seconds. Is it 95% in 15 seconds, in which case put it into the 10 to 19, 15. So the time element is that 0 to 9 seconds, 10 to 19 seconds, 20 to 29 seconds, 30 to 59 seconds, or is it 60 seconds plus? I'd just like to vote on the poll there, and just going to share the results up with you here. And John, looks like the overwhelming majority of people here are choosing 20 to 29 seconds. Based on your experience, is that the most sensible place to put it?
It's not the most sensible, but it is the most common. So it's, again, I mean, and we don't blame any of the people that are doing this now. I mean, these are inherited practices, right? And so the story really is, we didn't come up with this, we were told to do this. And I think, again, from the standpoint of leading the charge, you need to question your service level and say, how did we come up with this? This is the best question you can ask, is very simple. How did we come up with our service level? And then don't talk. And you'll be amazed at the stuttering, and inability to give you a straight answer. So ask that question. How did we come up with our service level? And ask everybody. And okay, so we'd love to hear what those responses are.
So if you could put your responses in it, how did you come up with the service level target that you've chosen? My guess is that there's a sort of 80-20 is the Pareto rule, and whether that's applied to service levels or not, I don't know. But it would be interesting to see the audience. So if you could type into the chat room, why did you come up with your service level target? Would be great. Would be great to see. Right, we're going to jump across to now to Chris Steely, and Chris, you're going to have a look at service level, scheduling technology. So, Chris, if we could pass the baton across to you.
That's perfect. Thanks, John. Can you hear me okay?
Yep. We can indeed.
Great stuff. Yes, I've realised that the audio problems today have been caused by my new Bluetooth headset. I'm getting sounds coming from the computer and sounds coming from the phone at the same time and clashing with each other. So hopefully I've sorted that out, and here we go. So can everybody see my slides? Workforce management enables best practice. Basically, we've seen some great tips, 5 great tips from John today. Hopefully we all have some good takeaways from that. A key point that we made at the start was that without some sort of enabling technology, it's rather hard to execute on those ideas and get the benefits. So there's some great benefits on offer. I'm thinking particularly of the scenarios that John ran through when showing us different scheduling alternatives, applying different constraints and things like that. Really difficult unless you've got some sort of technology. Now, spreadsheets are a great starting point, but they've got a number of limitations. And several people made that observation in the chat room today. That was interesting to see. What I'd like to do now is spend a few minutes just explaining how workforce management software can help and to address those issues, and finish with some good news, because today it's more affordable to get into workforce management applications than it ever was in the past. Now, hopefully we can see on the screen a diagram here called the workforce management cycle. Those of you that are into WFM will be very familiar with this, but just to quickly run through it, this is the cycle that underlines the whole practice of delivering good staff planning, good forecasting and scheduling, whether or not using software, to be honest. And it starts on the diagram here with forecasting. So we're looking at historic data and known special events to forecast from the past what's likely to happen in the future. We then move on to calculating staffing requirements. This is something that John touched on when he was talking about different service levels. Choose your service level wisely. If it's easy to make a selection of service level when you're working on your staffing calculations, that's going to help that. It's also important to be able to use different staffing calculations for different media, because inbound calls need to be handled, of course, in a very different way to chats and emails, things like that. We move on to optimized scheduling, so building those shifts. I've had some interesting discussions about that today. Building shifts that match supply with demand, that match your workforce to your workload, as John put it. That's the very important step where a lot of the return on investment comes from. We can look at publishing those shifts to agents via an agent portal, which is a great way of driving good behavior, engaging agents in the scheduling process. There are tools to help on the day when plan and actual don't match. And picking up on another point that John made is having some good reporting capability, so you can track where you're having spikes of illness or other absences, things like that, and help make that more visible and help manage it in a positive way. What we're going to do in the next few minutes, I'll hand over in a second to my colleague Dean, Those items I've highlighted in red there, we're going to give you a quick cameo appearance by Injixo WFM to show how that software addresses those points, and hopefully that will be of some interest. So over to Dean for the demonstration.
Right, thank you very much, Chris. John T, if you can possibly pass control over to me, fantastic. Thank you very much. So hopefully everybody can see my screen. I'm going to touch on Chris's highlight points there, hopefully in the same order going around that cycle. So very quickly, John's initial comment about obviously getting the service level target correct in the first instance. Doing it individually per separate channel could also vary as well. Like this is one of our calculation scripts for building requirements into the planning tool itself. But what we have is the ability to not just do them individually, but blend them together as well. So you might have separate targets for every different area of the business or even type of contact coming in. So like people who want to phone up and make a quick payment might drop off the line very quickly. So you might want a higher service level there. Whereas somebody with a drawn out, more open-ended query might be more willing to hang on longer. And in our requirement calculations, you can actually specify not only where you get your data from, but as you can see in these bottom sections, what the service level target is. And every time we run a calculation here, you could actually vary that, that service level. So, for example, on my inquiries line, I could change that to 19.5 seconds. And when I get to my web chat, I could change the type of calculation as well to factoring in not just web chats as individual items, but also the service level to say maybe 75%, they might hold on longer, so maybe 120 seconds. But then they can handle maybe 4 different web chats at the same time, and there's obviously the period of time the person is actually spent dealing with each individual contact out of the overall time that that chat is open. So it might be 30% of each chat is actually active. So building that, that really infinite and tight variation on your service levels, like John said, can make a massive impact on your actual staffing demand that comes out the back end of these. But also, by doing like we got here, 4 separate channels, all feeding their own individual service levels into one overall staffing requirement as well, can obviously save a massive amount on your staffing demand, and obviously potentially making scheduling easier, getting that skill blending a lot better, and upskilling people into the right areas as well, because it will help you highlight those differences. Now, the next screen I've got goes into that scheduling side, and what we got on the bottom here is a heat map showing exactly that. At the moment, I've got this comparing my requirements versus my staffing, and what we can see on that top line in the heat map with the blue and pink color coding is how many people are under or overstaffed by. But if I change this to requirement, what we'll be seeing straight away is at any time of the day, in the green lines, if we added up that requirement, it would actually add up to more than what you need from staffing in that multi-skilled style of environment. So here, on average across mine, it's 1 person or 1 head in the business per every individual 15 minutes. Now, over a 12-hour period, that is in theory, like John had the example earlier with a 12-hour shift, that's one whole resource saved potentially from this individual down on Monday that could move elsewhere in the business. Could be on a different department, maybe on a different day to help that area out. It's that reallocation of the resources. But the advantage with a planning tool is as you apply things to the schedule, like for example, if somebody phones in sick, you want to see that impact. So if I just flick this back to coverage, double click on somebody's schedule and apply a sickness, which literally is just adding a full day activity in, picking the date range, what we'll see is the heat map instantly updates. It's the same as if we were ring fencing an activity out. So like here, I've got somebody just doing a block of time with 1 individual skill being factored in. If I made that a longer period of time during the day, again, it's going to have an impact, not just on that one individual, business area. It's going to actually have a knock-on effect to all the other potential skills that person could do by having them as being multi-skilled. So it gives that impact assessment as well. Now, one nice little bit that Injixo does here is in that green area, is as you ring fence people out to using one of their skills, you'll also see skilling gaps appear in that green section. So when you're short of people with a skill, you can identify not just we're short of people, but we're short of a certain skill maybe. So you might be overstaffed overall, but you just have not got enough, skilled people for that one particular job. So again, save recruitment costs and, obviously the knock-on effects of that by just upskilling somebody. Now, rushing quickly through, I've also got open here is the agent portal. And I think it's that rapport you have with your agents that also drives the impact on how they, do they show up sick on the day because they don't fancy the shift they've got because it's a last minute thing they've been notified of. With an agent portal like we got here, the person can, this is just a dashboard, but they can view the next 7 days in advance. But in the background, they can view, get the right screen, that always helps. They can view as long into the future as you allow them to see all their schedules. So I've published mine here up until the mid of July, giving them the awareness of they know where their shifts are going to be. They know the breakdown of what jobs they're going to be doing well in advance. So if there is any changes needing, they can let you know with plenty of time to make those impact potential changes as minimal damaging as possible to you. But also an agent portal like this, if somebody does need time off, minimize their time away from the desk. They could do this from home whilst they're sitting on the bus or the train on the way out or into the office. But, it minimizes their time of walking away from their desk, not being available for the calls that you're planning them for. So you're getting the best value out of that, that price that you're paying for them for every individual hour of the day. Obviously, with an agent portal like this, it's available on smartphones. You can even sync it into the calendar on their personal device so that the calendar will actually alert them to changes and things as they happen as well. So it gives them a full ability to control their own life and be part of the process, not just the receiver off the end of it. Now, finally, the last little bit before I run out of time, and Chris has a little telling off of me, is it's reporting off the end of it at the same time. So here we've got an active dashboard. What this is initially trying to show us is those green bars where we're under and overstaffed. We can review this post-event, and the first thing I might look at here is, okay, we got some overstaffing. It's two to three people. But why have we got overstaffing? Why wasn't that extra capacity used for something else? Like John mentioned, one-to-ones, training, getting more out of the people and making them feel rewarded for the efforts that they put in as well. And where we have got understaffing, why was that so severe if it was severe? So it's bringing that information backwards and forwards. But these obviously all update in real time, and obviously the best systems should update in real time. So as you get that feed of information coming in, like if I change this to today, what it will do is it highlights that we've got lots of overstaffing on today. Again, the question should be asked, what can we do to make best use of that value for money we're getting out of the people? And finally, and last but not least, being able to report, like John said, on shrinkage. Here is a complete breakdown of an individual month for every individual person. And we can see just at the top first example, somebody's paid 115 hours. Their total time on schedules is 117, so including non-paid activities. But what's the percentage split of their time? So here we got by individual activity, but also at the bottom of the page, we've actually got, we'll try and get the PDF viewer not to bring his little highlight up. We've also got total percentage splits. So we've got business-wide percentage splits into each of those activities. So if you've got a lot of sickness or a lot of people pulling off the phone for whatever reason, you can target those areas.
Thank you very much for that, Dean. That's a nice run through. Chris, I think you've got some concluding comments you'd like to make.
Yes, thanks, Tomty. Just finally wrapping up there, we've just been having a look at Injixo WFM. And the good news that I mentioned earlier is that it's very low cost. There were a couple of questions about low cost WFM in the chat room. That's exactly what we're looking at here. Basically everything you need in WFM available via the browser. And that £9 per user per month really is all inclusive. There's no setup fee, trainings included, and there's no minimum term. You don't need to sign up for 12 months, 2 years or whatever. So it's very low cost, very high functionality. Bearing in mind that I'm not going to cover every point on the slide, what I will very quickly say is that you can see for yourself every Friday at 11 o'clock UK time, we do a deep dive demo covering the whole planning cycle, the whole exam cycle. If you'd like to join that, please drop me an email and I'll be happy to send you login details. In the meantime, check us out on our website and our blog, and you can even see some interesting videos on YouTube. We think they're interesting anyway. Thanks, Jossie.
Wonderful. Thank you very much indeed for that. We're going to jump back to the news desk now. And Megan, what's been happening on the chat room?
Well, firstly, we're going to pick up from the question earlier. How did you come up with your service level target? And there are a few interesting responses. Adam said, we're a young contact centre and the management applied 80/20 as an industry standard. Sean said, senior management believe it's an industry standard. Michael said, I questioned it and was told it was a common service level decided by the company and was not something we had any control over. And we've had a final comment in saying SLAs are determined by customer satisfaction surveys. Chris, were those results a surprise? Sorry, Chris.
Oh, I muted myself there. Here we go. Yes. Am I back on audio? Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, we can hear you.
As John was saying earlier, quite often, the 80/20 thing is not come about as a result of any scientific thought or particularly, deep reasoning. It's just something we were given as a starting point, and quite often it's not revisited.
Okay, thank you for that. We've got some more tips in now. There's one from Adam that says, engage staff, listen to them and apply this information to your demand. It sounds really basic, but I found understanding the tasks and timings makes a big difference. We've had another tip in from Rachel. I really like this one. That says, we set up a scheduling reps group within the call centre that met once a month. As part of that, we talked about common issues and asked agents what they would like to do to find solutions. John, is this something you see quite a lot of, actually talking to agents and getting them involved?
We don't see as much as we should, and we say we've reached a point where you've applied technology, you've captured cost savings, and now unfortunately you're going to have to talk to your employees. And it's the truth though. And I got to tell you, I don't want to give it away, but I'm thinking Rachel 11 right now is the front runner, just based on this is a very, very basic thing to do. If we put these people in a very small space, we ask them to do the same thing over and over again with very little hope of advancement, and we say, hey, maybe we'll talk to you. It's such a basic thing, but if we can really understand what they want, we can drive so much productivity. And this is a basic and critical part of the story.
Okay, thank you for that. We've got another tip in now from Ramachandra that says, the best way of reducing after-call work is to understand, minimise and automate all the after-call work that the advisors have to perform for call completion. We have set a system timeout and automated some of the after-call processes. And we've got a question from Michael that says, why can't the call centre use the abandon rate as the most important rather than the service level? Surely if the caller has had their call answered and you've resolved their query, they're satisfied and for that reason they have called has been resolved and forgotten the wait time. Dean, is this something you could shed some light on?
Oh, this is a good one. One of my favourites. I do like this. I totally agree. And when I saw John's graph earlier, I had a little grin on my face because it's so true. The amount of people that phone up a contact centre and hang up within 5-10 seconds because they either haven't got a contact straight away or thought wrong number is amazing, and that really impacts your service levels. Whereas if you go from the abandon rate, it's taking in everybody pretty much that calls through, and I see that as a really good way of moving forward, because answering within a certain amount of time, as John proved, doesn't necessarily guarantee satisfaction. At the end of the day, I hold on the line for 2 minutes, as long as I know I'm going to get my issue resolved. The abandon rate is a really good driver, especially if you want quality of service as well. And I think that's what drives the customer return calls as well. If they don't get the quality, you're going to get a call back again and again. You want to reduce that down. And that's where this really comes in place.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks for that, Dean. We've just got a final tip now from Rachel that says, we have 2 intranet pages. Ask a holiday question and ask the schedulers. Agents post directly to this and we publish the responses. It's pretty much a live question and answers page. And I think that's about all we've got time for, John T. If I want to pass back to you.
Indeed. Thank you very much indeed for that. Well, it's been a very active discussion on the chat room, some great thoughts overall. So if you could just type into the chat room in 1 or 2 words, what did you like best about the webinar today? You could put that into the chat room. Slides are available on Call Center Helper, callcenterhelper.com/recorded-webinars. And you can also get a copy of the webinar. We went through a lot of detail today, so if you want to access that and share that with your team, you can do that through the link. So a lot of details on there. Tomorrow we're going to be looking at 30 new contact center tips. That's tomorrow at 1 o'clock. So just like to thank our speakers. John, thank you very much for attending, and hopefully we can twist your arm to attend another one of our webinars in the future.
Sure. Love it. This was great. Thank you so much for including me.
Thank you to Chris Dealey.
Thanks as always, John T.
Thanks to Dean Couchman.
Thanks, everyone. Good to be back.
And thank you to everyone in the audience. We can carry on the discussion on the chat room if you'd like, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow when we look through 30 contact center tips. So thanks, everyone, and goodbye.